seen them, and we talked about this a little bit last week, and greeted them from afar, and having acknowledged that they were strangers and exiles on the earth, for those who speak thus make it clear that they are seeking a homeland or a country of their own, the NASB says. If they had been thinking of that land from which they had gone out, they would have had opportunity to return. Okay? But as it is, they desire a better country, that is, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. All right? So because they are seeking this heavenly city, they are the kinds of people that God can call his friends. You know, you are my friends if you do what I command you. God is not ashamed to be called their God. They trust him and they believe in him and they live their lives in light of that. Okay? And so God has prepared a city for them. They looked forward. They trusted God's promise. Okay? Not only the future promise that all of us are still sojourning toward, but promises of this king and this kingdom and all of this beautiful language that the prophets use in describing what we have today, this better situation that we have today. They died and they didn't see that. Okay? But we have seen these promises of God fulfilled, especially in Christ and his kingdom and salvation from our sins and just all kinds of things that we'll talk about. Okay? Comments or questions so far? Okay. Kind of sets us up. So, yeah.
So a question, so I mean, it's interesting that he stops here and has this sort of interlude before he gets to Abraham.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, that's a good observation. So let's think about this for a second. So did Abraham's coming on the scene change anything? So what, okay, so maybe you have an answer in your mind?
No, I'm throwing it out, man.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I love it. Okay. Oh, yeah, Bill?
No, different question when you get the other.
Okay. All right. So was there a purpose in having these individuals talked about and then the interlude and then Abraham? Okay. Not that I know of. Okay, I don't know, but my brain, went to, okay, did things change with the call of Abraham? And I will say that, yes, they did. Because what was the difference? If we think about Genesis 1 through 11, how was God dealing with mankind? Okay, he's directly dealing with mankind, and he's dealing with everybody as a whole, the world as a whole, right? And how did that end up? How did that end? How did that turn out? Where it didn't turn out well, did it? Hebrews 1 through 11, Genesis, I'm going to Romans and then we'll go to Genesis. Genesis 1 through 11 is the chronicle of man's rebellion toward God, okay? Right from the start. First sin, the first lie, the first sin, the first murder, the earth being full of violence, men's hearts filled with only evil continually, Noah, the drunkenness of Noah, the Tower of Babel, just all of these failures. And then what happens in chapter 12? Okay. Now he's not dealing with the whole world anymore. Okay. So he calls this one man, and through him, this one man of good character, and you can read all about this in Acts 7. So he calls Abraham. Abraham, by faith, goes out, and he's already been mentioned to us, you know, to the land which God would show him, yet not knowing where he was going. And so he's now he dealt with him. Abraham became the father of Isaac, Isaac of Jacob, Jacob the 12 patriarchs. Then the national promise came into being where they was made a great nation and everything. And eventually down the line, after a whole bunch of history took place, then Jesus came into the world through. So that's you know, when I think about Abraham, there is that difference as far as how God was dealing with the world, okay? So I will admit that I haven't given any thought to how this is arranged and if there's some significance to that. But now that it's been brought up, I'll keep working on that. Bill?
A whole different topic.
Yeah.
It struck me at the end here, it says they desire a better heavenly country.
Mm-hmm.
And it was thinking about how much easier it is to live by faith when you have your eyes focused on that and not be thinking about this world being your own home.
Yeah.
You know, if you
Yeah.
set that aside, it's a whole lot easier to live by faith.
Well, it is. You bet it is. You know, and one of the things, Bill, I tell people here all the time is take life seriously. You guys know where I'm going with this? Take life seriously, but don't take it too seriously because it's temporary, you know? So we have responsibilities and we have things that we need to do in this world, and that's fine. But this world's passing away. You know, it's just a temporary situation. So live it, but live it knowing that it's short so that you can enjoy it, right? Even with the hardships, you can enjoy it when you know that there's something better, and we are going there, right? That's not our choice. I mean, as far as the fact that we're leaving this world, you know. So that's how I look at it, you know. Yeah. So very, very good, Bill. Yeah. Todd.
And there's a lot in chapter 11. Everybody knows that, but I think that we can sometimes fall into the trap of trying to make too much of it,
Uh-huh.
especially chapter 11.
Uh-huh.
This is like your preamble to this class said. These are examples. This is what faith looks like.
Yeah.
And there really isn't much of a intermission here between Noah and Abraham, but he does use, he'll use an instance with Noah, but he does have a couple things to say about Abraham because Abraham did show faith in a couple different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Go somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know where. Okay, I've got the faith to do that. Incredibly, sacrifice your son.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll learn, well, why did he have that kind of faith? Because he just figured, I'll kill him, God will raise him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's an incredible amount of faith, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what the writer of Hebrews is trying to say here.
Yeah.
Is just let go, have faith, God will do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Without trying to read too much into it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's remarkable also that Jesus said about Abraham in John 8, you know, where he said to Abraham, rejoice to see my day. And he saw it and was glad. Totally believed God, right? This descendant's going to come and the whole earth will be blessed through him. And Abraham's like, yeah, you know, so just simple faith, trusted God. And that's what all these examples all point to that same thing. Did I see yeah, Kevin?
I was just going to say with kind of going back to Chris's original comment about verse 13, why he has this interlude. I was looking at it as this first section up until this point is Abraham before Isaac, and so the Israel as a entity hasn't started yet, and then we have this interlude, and then it's Abraham with Isaac, and so that's really the seed of Israel starting. Everything after that is Israel, and then he ends it again with the chapter ends with an almost identical statement as verse 13 of, and all these, though commended through their faith, did not receive what was promised.
Mm-hmm.
And so it seems like it's just kind of reiterating, it's like this is the world before Israel, and illustrations of the faith,
Yeah.
after that, here's more illustrations of faith. But
Okay.
even Israel, and this is the argument he's been making throughout Hebrews, is even Israel was not the full fulfillment of getting the ultimate promise.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, and see, that just ties right into Romans, from the standpoint that in Romans we learn that righteousness was based on faith before the law and before Abraham. Okay, it goes back before Abraham, all the way back to Abel, and then Abraham. Yeah, I'm just kind of working through that here in my mind. Yeah, but the point being that it's always been by faith, period. No matter what the time period was, whether if it's the Garden of Eden or if it's the end of time, that never changes, right? And so, of course, the people that are receiving this message from this writer of the book of Hebrews, they need to be solid in this. They need to be standing on this foundation that if you're going to be saved, and he's given, amongst his exhortations, warnings, if you're going to be saved, it's got to be on this basis, and it's always been on this basis, okay? So that's a very strong part of the message here. So by faith, Abraham, when he was tested, verse 17, offered up Isaac, and he who had received the promises was in the act of offering up his only son, of whom it was said, through Isaac shall your offspring be named. Right? So here's the one, Genesis 21:12, through whom the promise has been given. He's told now to take him on Mount Moriah and to sacrifice him. He considered that God, verse 19, was able to raise him from the dead, from which, figuratively speaking, he did receive him back, right? So Abraham was so sure, so confident that God would keep his word, that there were no circumstances under which he believed he would go back on it. Even something like that, where if he was to go through with it, the promise that God had made could not have been fulfilled unless God raised him from the dead. So he just went straight there. Well, he'll just raise him because he promised, right? Okay. So isn't that a strong lesson about how God wants us to look at his word? He promised. See? In your faithfulness, the psalmist said, bring my soul out of trouble. In your faithfulness, you our protector, our rock, our fortress, our salvation. In your faithfulness, bring me out of trouble. See? And so it is God's faithfulness that we rely on because he promised. See? Yeah, Sheila?
We got to grab a hold of that. I mean, it's
Yep.
like we need to, it ain't even time to waste to even try to think about going a different way because it's just right there,
Yeah.
and we got to grab it and we got to learn to hold on to it. We got to be real with it, because
Yeah.
it's gonna get worse.
Yeah. 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 Monique comes into my office often, she's like trying to watch something on television, and she'll come in and he said, is there not one movie or show or anything that you can watch where you don't have to, and you know where I'm going with that. It just,
I look at the nature show now because I see God's work, I see the beauty of it, it just keeps me.
there you, yeah, I know, right? Yeah, old movies and, yeah.
I just think it's important to realize that Abraham didn't have that kind of faith to start with.
Mm-hmm.
Because through his life, he's demonstrated over and over again, he didn't have faith in God.
Mm-hmm.
In the multiple times where he wife because he was afraid.
Mm-hmm.
The other things that he did that demonstrated that he, like with having a son with Hagar,
Yeah.
he didn't always have that faith. It took time and experience and going through all the things that he went through to grow that kind of faith. And so it gives me hope that my faith can grow as well, and I can work towards having this kind of faith.
No, I'm being facetious in my mind. It's like, he had to grow, right? And if faith is the basis of being right with God, then that has built within it time to grow, doesn't it? Yeah. If it's by law, that's a moot point. It's either you're perfect or you're not perfect, right? So I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, that's a really good point, because he did show, of course, I've told you about a guy down in Sumner a long time ago, Lee Eccles. He preached a sermon called The Supermen of the Bible, and he had all these guys written up on the board, and he started preaching on all these different, super saints. And he'd have to just, well, that one wasn't, and then he'd just have to keep crossing them out, because, and by the time we got to the end, all the super saints had clay feet, so did I see, oh yeah, Chris?
Well, I mean, the entirety of this list, though, is episodic. I mean, it's events that demonstrate faith.
Yeah, yeah.
A lot of times we want to treat faith as this sort of nebulous, well, I know I have faith, I really feel like this.
Mm-hmm.
It is demonstrated. Now, we're going to fail in our demonstration. That's your point but there are going to be times in our life where your faith is going to be tested and you are going to overcome because of God. And that's the episodes he's talking about here. A faithful person has a pattern of that.
Mm-hmm.
Even as we fall and fail. And so I think it's important because, again, we oftentimes want to create sort of this sponginess around faith. And in a certain sense, it emanates from the heart, so there is that. But it is demonstrated.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And the recipients of this letter would, of course, be very familiar with these individuals, and I would think very moved and inspired to, that they would be strengthened by this, that they would look back at these individuals and how this writer is saying, look at these and understand that they did the things they did because they trusted God. And you need to trust God, right? You need to trust Him. It's hard. You're going through tough things. You're suffering because of the choice that you have made. But these individuals trusted. And so we need to do the same thing. Trust Him. Desiree, you got something?
Yes, and I was just going to let end that through it all, God is so merciful and patient,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's what I see that it's just amazing how He puts up with me.
Yeah,
Fall.
yeah. Yeah, we're happy. We're blessed, blessed are those, we are happy that our standing with God, our good standing with God, is based upon our trusting Him and not upon our being perfect, and He made the way open for us. And so we all have reasons, I'll just guess, to be happy for that, because if were it not for that, we would have blown it a long time ago, right? And so, I mean, it's just the gospel, the good news. And I'll settle down and not go off on a thing here. So anyway, example after example. In verse 20, by faith Isaac invoked future blessings on Jacob and Esau. Okay. By faith Jacob, when dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph, bowing in worship over the head of his staff. By faith Joseph, at the end of his life, made mention of the exodus of the Israelites and gave direction concerning his bones. Okay, so all of these were they knew that something was coming, you know. And all of the things that they did at God's moving, God's direction, and it was all by that trust in their God. Okay. By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents because they saw that the child was beautiful and they were not afraid of the king's edict. Okay. By faith, Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He considered the reproach of Christ greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward, right? So what did Moses know about Christ? Okay. He didn't know about Christ per se, but yet he did, even though he didn't. His actions were motivated by the promises of God. They were motivated by trust. He trusted God, right? And so in essence, here, the reproach of Christ. It wasn't Christ reproaching him. It was the reproach that the world has, the animosity of the world toward him. The same kind of animosity that was directed to Christ was directed to Moses. So the reproach of Christ is what he's referring to there in that sense. You know, he was willing to take that reproach rather than live his fleeting life in a way that's it's totally wasted, right? And has no promise attached to it. See? Yeah.
I just see now how he saw everything different
Mm-hmm.
with the people that was already there, and he was trying to show love and like Christ was doing. He
Mm-hmm.
was trying to help people and pull them out of the world,
Mm-hmm.
the situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in my mind. I'm just,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
just pitching it and going along with the word.
Yeah.
And you know, and it's just my thoughts. I'm thinking, but wow, that's amazing.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. It is. Yeah. And there's, of course, you know, a whole bunch we could say about every one of these examples, you know, but just keeping in mind that they're all people that trusted God. And that's what he wants the readers of this letter to do, is to trust him the way these individuals trusted him in these episodes of their lives. Verse 27, by faith he left Egypt, not being afraid of the anger of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is unseen, right? You know, and so it takes us kind of back to Hebrews 4, where there is no creature hidden from his sight. All things are open and laid bare to the eyes of him with whom we have to do. God is there. And so he put his faith in him, and so he acted accordingly. More afraid, if you will, if I can use that term, of sinning against God than of the anger of the king. By faith he kept the Passover and sprinkled the blood so that the destroyer of the firstborn might not touch them. This is what God told them to do. By faith, the people crossed the Red Sea as on dry land, but the Egyptians, when they attempted to do the same, were drowned. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell down after they had been encircled for 7 days. By faith, Rahab the prostitute did not perish with those who were disobedient because she had given a friendly welcome to the spies, right? So by faith, by faith, by faith, by faith, the people trusted God, right? They were looking for the city which has foundations, whose architect and builder is God. They were looking for a future, okay, that they trusted in and that they believed in. And so the things that they had to endure in this life were not enough to cause them to ultimately turn around. Were they perfect people? No. But you know, here's one of the things that these epiphanies that you have along the way that take a long time to come to. And I was talking to the preacher that's been preaching a meeting down in Kent yesterday, and we were talking about some of these things. And it's like when you come out, when you're in the world, your parents are not Christians, and nobody around you is, and you get to a certain age and you start living your life based on what you've seen all your life, and so you're drinking and you're drugging and you're chasing and you're doing all this stuff. And then you become a Christian. It's like, okay, I was doing this, right? And now I need to do this. Oh, you're just so centrally located there, right? So I was doing this, and so now I got to do this. So consequently, in my thinking, then I had to be perfectly over here because I seem to be pretty perfect at doing this, And so I need to be perfect at doing this, okay? Well, it took me a long time to come to the realization that that's not how it works. And so I had a hard time. I had a hard struggle with this because I trying to be perfect, and I wasn't. That's hard because, and I remember when I was at Sumner, a young preacher, and I'm preaching and I'm thinking to myself, they have it. These are God's people, but I'm not. I'm not making it. And I was angry, and people would sometimes, I'd pounding on, screaming, and, but that's how I was thinking. I was like, I'm not, and that was one of the reasons I took off and went to the West Indies, is because I wasn't making it. I really wasn't. People didn't know, but I was struggling really badly, see, because of that. So anyway, through all that, the settled, calm conviction that I finally came to is this: life is messy. And God's always known it's messy, and that's why he's done what he's done, and that's why Jesus came, and that's why salvation is based on faith and not works, and that's why we're saved by grace through faith. All of that stuff is because life is messy. And when I finally came to understand that, then okay. And guess what happens? Now you start seeing things in the Bible that you never saw before. See? And then things settle out and you say, okay, I know I'm not perfect, but I sure do believe, and I'll do everything that I can to demonstrate it. And if I don't demonstrate it in a given situation, I've got God saying, just come tell me about it. And you can, and because of my righteousness, God says, his righteousness and his faithfulness, he'll forgive me because he promised. And I believe him. See? So I can keep right on going and keep on growing, and, and heaven will be there. See? Even though I'm not perfect, that's the good news. That's the gospel. Remember from Romans, justification is by faith apart from works of law. That's the gospel. That's good news. Yeah, Todd?
I really am appreciating the comment that we had about Abraham and how Abraham had to grow into some things.
Yeah.
And which makes his examples of faith even more impressive. And here we get to Moses, and I've seen one word come up a couple times. And I think when we think of Moses, at least when I think of Moses, and you say, hey, Todd, you come up with something on Moses real quick that he wasn't real good at.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say, yeah, Moses had a fear issue. Right?
Mm-hmm.
He was apprehensive.
Mm-hmm.
But here, the Hebrew writer said about his parents, they didn't fear the kings either.
Yeah.
And about Moses, he didn't fear the Pharaoh.
Mm-hmm.
So he kind of as an adult, he didn't fear the Pharaoh. So
Mm-hmm.
his acts of faith because he grew into those. We could see that over life. And here we're talking about Moses, and we're seeing kind of the same thing. He is commended for his faithfulness because he didn't have the fear of these things.
Yeah.
But he also had to grow into these things.
Yeah.
You can see it.
And do you suppose, and I'm supposing, that if I'm one of these people receiving this Hebrew letter, and he brings Moses up, right, and talks about Moses, his faith here, there's also something to consider that would be valuable for these people that are getting this letter, and that is the fact that Moses broke faith with God. And when he broke faith with God, the consequence, as you know, is that he did not set foot in that promised land. Okay? Now, talk about a lesson for them, for us, for sure, right? But talk about, you know, an incarnated warning that here this man of great faith, you know, when he disobeyed God in front of the people and disrespected him and broke faith with him, he didn't do what he told him to do. You know, and I always think about, you know, Moses going back to God and saying, in essence, what could you know, I'd love to, you know, and God said, enough. Speak no more to me. I don't want to hear it. Okay? Go up on the mountain, and that's where you're going to die. And you can look and you can see it, but you're not going to set one foot on it. Okay? And the central issue was faith, but he broke it. Okay? So what's going to happen? You know, how should we escape if we neglect so great a salvation? What's going to happen if I break faith? See, with God, as far, you know, in my life, not on a given instance, but in my life. Right? Did I see a hand? Oh yeah, Kevin, and then Chris.
Yeah, that's something that really bothers me with this last section, because that's like a lot of these people follow that theme, right? Like I think reading the chapter, thinking about like, well, these are people that we should emulate, and I think about Abraham or Moses, where I might say like, well, yeah, they made some big mistakes, but overall, like, they were on a good track. But then you get to the Israelites that crossed the Red Sea, that was by faith. And the same Israelites destroyed Jericho, and that was by faith. And the same Israelites rejected God when they had the opportunity to enter the promised land and were cursed to die in the wilderness. And then you look at people like Jephthah and Samson. Like, I don't look at those people and think like those were great, righteous people that are so good. But I think there's still the message that we can be imperfect.
Yeah.
Like you were describing that we're really great at doing all these bad things, and we want to be perfect at doing all the good things. I think it should be a message of hope to us that
Yes.
Samson and Jephthah
Yes.
are in this list.
Yes.
And I had a conversation with a friend a while back, that they feel like, you know, well, this is, like Chris said, this is episodic. Like, this is just a quick example of like a good thing that they did, but they're not actually going to get to heaven. But I can't read the end of the chapter and think, though they were commended by faith, and then chapter 12 starts, they are part of a great cloud of witnesses.
Yeah.
It's encouraging us to look towards heaven.
Yeah.
And I think we should be encouraged, and not really looking at these people as, well, they were terrible and they did this one okay thing. It's like, well, I'm terrible, and I do a couple okay things.
Yeah.
But I can still be a son of God.
Yeah. 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 And those examples like that were a big part of helping me come to that life is messy conclusion, is because look, these people, the Holy Spirit put these guys in here as examples of faith, and yet they were as imperfect as they come, you know. But God, so how is God looking at us? See? Well, it's very clear that, as he says in that 103rd Psalm, you know, I don't, you're not dealing with you according to your sins or rewarding us according to our iniquities. You know, he knows our frame, that we are but dust. That's how he looked. He knows we're weak. You know, he knows that, and he's taken all that into account in how he deals with us, even Jephthah and Samson, right? And people, and all of us imperfect people. That's how he looks at us. He wants us to be where he is, and he's made that possible, even though this life is messy. And like I was telling you a couple weeks ago or something, like I remember being young, and I'm out down here in Renton, lived in Renton, and looking, getting ready to go into junior high, and I'm thinking about how perfect my life's going to be. It's all in front of me, man. I'm going to do this right. Well, no, not so much. I didn't do it right. So yeah, it's a really good point to keep in mind, and it encourages us to do good, to do as good as we can, because it's God's love is what gives us a future, So what's our response to that going to be? And that's what it's about. Chris?
Well, God, through the writer here, he bookends this chapter, which we obviously divided later on. But he says in verse 39 of chapter 10, "We are not of those who shrink back and are destroyed, but those who have faith and preserve their souls." We are faith forward. You, Hebrews, are faith forward. Here's a ton of examples of people of what faith forward looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, chapter 12, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses of faith, that we're faith forward, let us also lay aside every weight, right? That's an important word there, weight.
Yep.
The burden that might come, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sin, which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance. So this is the pacing. So all of these episodes are here, but it was not, their faith itself was not episodic.
Mm-hmm.
These are activities, and so I agree with you. I think it's an important point Kevin makes. I don't think he's saying, hey, these were examples of faith, but these guys are out of here, right? I don't think
Right.
that's the point.
No. Right.
But let us run with endurance the race that's set before us, and he's going to talk about what that race looks like, because that's the point of faith. Faith is something that endures, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we, as faithful people, need to endure.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So that's the strong message of this chapter. We're out of time right now. So we're going to go ahead and break here and pick up. We'll just have some more examples of faith that we're not going to go into detail on them, obviously. And then we'll finish up these last verses next week and then get into chapter 12. Thank you very much. Great class, everybody. Thanks for your comments and participation.